How do you define leadership? They had a heck of a hard time trying to do this. And from the 140 CEOs that I interviewed, I got back 140 different responses. Everybody had their own take on how they define leader and leadership, which to me was completely fascinating. Now, of course, there were some common threads that came up, which is something that we're going to talk about later when we look at the skills and mindsets. But I started to think about this for a little bit. And when I was asking CEOs this question, I would get a lot of long pauses from CEOs. And some of them would say, that's an interesting question. Or they might say, nobody's ever asked me that before. And in my mind, I'd be thinking, what do you mean nobody's ever asked you this before? You're leading a multi-billion-dollar company. You are responsible for the lives of thousands of people, and nobody has ever asked you how you would define leader or leadership? It doesn't make any sense. But then I thought about it for a little while and realized that the reason why it's so hard for us to do this is because it's kind of like trying to define and explain water to somebody that has never seen it or heard of it or has tasted it. I mean, think about it. How would you explain water to somebody? Would you say it's a clear, tasteless liquid? Well, lots of liquids can fall into that category, but it's assumed that we all know what water is because it's everywhere. And the same thing is true for this. We all assume we know who a good leader is, but that's not necessarily the case. Think about it. We experience leadership and we see leaders in some form all over the place. It's ubiquitous. We hear it on the radio. We see it on TV. When we go to a store to grab a coffee, we see leadership happening. When you go to the supermarket, check in for a flight, when you show up to work, when you play sports or watch sports, we see and experience leadership and see and experience leaders multiple times a day in different contexts. And because of that, it's assumed that we all know who a good leader is. But that's a dangerous assumption to make. And really what this means is we need to take a big step back to start from a high level of understanding these two things. And because a lot of the top leaders that I interviewed struggled with this, it also means that inside of their organizations, they don't spend enough time thinking about this. And I know that this sounds like common sense, right? You're probably thinking, yeah, of course, Jacob, this, makes sense as a starting point. But unfortunately, as I'm telling you, this is something that we oftentimes overlook. So we have to start here. And again, hardest thing for CEOs to answer because they just don't think about it. But my message to you, the whole point that I'm trying to drive across with this is we do need to think about it and to define these things. Leadership is subjective, and that's okay. And you can see how the different definitions of leadership get reflected in different corporate cultures. So if you have one CEO who defines leadership and being a leader purely as business results, financial performance, goals, ROI, you're going to see the type of culture that creates. If you see another CEO who defines leadership in more kind of in human contexts, coaching others, inspiring others, helping them unlock their true potential, you're going to see the type of culture that creates. So I want to give you a couple examples, a couple definitions that I really like of leadership from some of the CEOs who I interviewed, and these aren't the ones that I used in the book. So if you have the book, these are different definitions from some of the other CEOs. So here are a couple of the leadership definitions that I really liked. So the first one is from Bob Chapman. Bob Chapman is the CEO of Barry Waymiller. It's a manufacturing company. They have around 12,000 employees. And Barry Waymiller is a very, very unique organization, and I have a couple stories in the book of some of the unique leadership practices and styles that they implement, but it all starts with their CEO, Bob Chapman, and how he thinks and defines leadership. And he says that leadership is the stewardship of the people whose lives you're entrusted to. The stewardship of the people whose lives you're entrusted to. So think about that definition. Does that resonate with you as a future leader or as a current leader? Does that definition make sense? Let me give you a couple others. George Oliver. He's the chairman and CEO of Johnson Controls. And it's a large organization, 120,000 employees around the world. And he breaks down leadership into just three components, three simple things. Have a vision, create a strategy, take action. That's it. That's his definition of leadership. Does that resonate with you? Or does the first one resonate with you a little bit more? Let me read you one more. This one is from Kathy Mazzarelli. She's the CEO of Graybar, a company that has 8,300 employees. And here's how she defines it: helping others realize their potential and inspiring them to work with you to achieve a shared vision for the future. So here we have 3 different CEOs, 3 different organizations. All the organizations are wildly successful, but they all define leadership and leader in a different way. So you can think about the 3 definitions that I shared with you and see which one resonates with you more, which one aligns more with your perspectives on leadership.